A very good evening to everyone, and thank you everyone, and especially Dr. Rahul Jindal also for taking out the time today for this webinar, and also a lot. Thank you to all the doctors who are still in the field and helping us get through the second wave of COVID now. Without taking further time, I would just like to give a small introduction for Dr. Rahul Jindal. Sir has been working as a Director Vascular and Endovascular Surgery for Fortis Hospital, Mohali. And Sir has been in the field of surgery for over 25 years and is associated with Fortis also for the past 14 years. Sir also has a lot of expertise in the vascular area and the field, and also the topic he's going to talk about today. So without taking further time, I would now like to give the mic to Dr. Rahul Jindal and he can take us through today. Thank you so much.
Sure, Priyanka, thank you. First of all, I really like to thank you everybody who has joined the program. We are doing this lecture also to celebrate the March, which was the previous month, as a DVT awareness, and also to celebrate the World Health Day, which was on 5th, and also because of the Vein Week, which we are celebrating internationally, and we are doing more than 300 different programs all across 60 countries. So we are 8 steering members of that committee, and we are trying to create venous awareness programs among the public, in sports areas, among the doctors, trying to do a small awareness programs in our areas so that we can have, overall impact in the world. So I'll start. It's a very interesting lecture, and I personally feel because this lecture is a very common issue which people face in day-to-day life in terms of, the management by drugs of venous thromboembolism and pulmonary embolism, and how do we manage them these days, and what are the drugs which are available, and how the newer drugs, how we can choose which drugs to use, and also what doses to be given. So if you look into the DVT, now is the third most common cause for cardiovascular disease. And if you look into the number of patients which gets affected, and in US it's around 9 lakhs, and if you look into the Europe, it's around 7.5 lakhs, and in India people say it's less than 2.5 lakhs, but I personally feel it will be more than 20 lakhs, because I think it's totally underestimated, because the number of patients with post-thrombotic syndrome which we see in a single clinic because of the neglected treatment for deep venous thrombosis is huge. So it's very underreported. If you look into the mortality, now the mortality with VTE, VTE is venous thromboembolism, means clots in the deep veins and the lungs, is combined together more than AIDS, road traffic accident, prostate cancer, and the breast cancer. So you can imagine the amount of awareness which is created for AIDS, for breast cancer, prostate cancer, road traffic accidents is huge. But amount of awareness for the VT is very poor. But the look into the amount of deaths which can happen with one single disease. So, and also the VT is a very preventive disease. So if you work properly, and everybody, all the surgeons and the public know about this disease, you can actually prevent deaths in more than 95% of the patients. So which is important to create an awareness. That's how you can, that's the only way you can do it. If you look into the incidence of VT, it increases with the age, and it's more in the males. If you look into the mortality, as you know, the short-term mortality means the chances of dying. It's in the hospital, 8 to 12%. And, over a period of 30 days, if you look, it still happens because of pulmonary embolism. If you look, patient has deep venous thrombosis. There are long-term consequences also. One of the most important consequence is the chances of recurrent DVT. Now, chances of recurrent DVT can happen at around 4 to 5% at 1 month, up to around 40% in 10 years. There are various risk factors which are associated with recurrence. Mainly are if you are a male, if you have a proximal DVT, and if your D-dimer levels are high. Then another major problem which happens is the post-thrombotic syndrome. Because of the deep venous thrombosis, if you don't get treated well, then you get what we call as deep venous insufficiency, leading to post-thrombotic syndrome, and it can affect you 60 to 85% of the patients. So it's a huge problem, and especially in the obese patients, and especially patients who are not treated well, this is a very big issue. Then the patients who has pulmonary embolism, they can lead to pulmonary hypertension. Now that can occur in up to around 4% of the survivors of acute PE. And if you look into this, and if it's untreated, it has got around 90% mortality. So DVT is not, a very simple disease. It has got a very bad long-term side effects if it's not treated properly in the first go. There are huge amount of guidelines which are published. We normally follow two guidelines, CHEST guidelines of America and the European guidelines which are there. Now, what are the challenges? Now, in the drug management, now we are not going to talk about the interventions today. So let's talk about the drugs. Now, most of the patients with DVT, we nowadays treat them with a low molecular weight heparin or a fondaparinux. The drugs which are given subcutaneously in your tummy, and we give them for few days, depending upon the patient. We sometimes give it under swelling for 5 to 7 days, and then we start these patients on oral anticoagulation on from the first day. So let's say you want to treat these patients on with low molecular weight heparin like enoxaparin or Fragmin or fondaparinux. Then, and you want to treat this patient with warfarin, you start the patients on warfarin on the first day. And we continue the anticoagulation at least for 5 days, first 5 days, and then we measure the INR values. If the INR value is more than 2, and then we can stop the anticoagulation. Now, what are the challenges is, one is you have to do the injections for the first few days and then wait for the INR. And there has been a lot of reports where the low molecular weight heparin has been discontinued despite insufficient INR, because the INR sometimes you don't achieve for 5 days. You have to continue the injections up to 5 to 8 days to 10 days. So sometimes if the physician is not aware or the patient is not aware, so they can stop the heparins before. So which is not a very good thing for the patient. The second problem is with the vitamin K antagonist. Vitamin K antagonist means warfarin and acetron. Now, they have a risk of bleeding, which is major bleeding is somewhere around 2.6%. And if you look into the non-major bleeding is around 7.4%. And then a very important thing which is there is the risk of bleeding is not associated to the INR values. And if you look into this, 75% of the patient will have a bleeding when the INR was normal. So, which is a very big problem, because your INR could be normal, you could be well controlled, but still you can have a bleeding. So, which is a very big issue with warfarin and acetron. Second is the TTRs. TTR means a time titrated ratio, means when the patient is on treatment, how much time the patient will have a INR value which we want. If you look into the most important clinical trial where we keep the patient under really strict supervision, we found that only 60 to 65% of the patients could be in the TTR time ratio. Means 70% of the time only maximum the patient will be protected from pulmonary embolism, and 30% of the time the INR will not be in the therapeutic value. And if you look into the common population, we think it will be somewhere around 50%. So 50% of the time, patient will not have the effects of vitamin K antagonist. So that's why what we observed was that, the patients who were treated with warfarin and acetron in the last few years, like in 1900s, like 2000 to 2010, those patients who were not really kept in a very close follow-up, they normally don't get a very good clearances of the clots, And these are the patients who come to you in 2015 or 20 with post-thrombotic syndrome. So that's what we observed in our practice. Then the problem is the risk of fatal life-threatening bleeding increases, as the age increases. So of course, as the age will increase, your chances of bleeding will increase. Then we come to the secondary prevention. Now, secondary prevention is of the VT is a very, very important, as you know, because once you have treated the main DVT, then what is the risk of having a recurrent DVT and major bleeding events? Sure, if your risk is, the bleeding is low, the risk is low of DVT, and you give the drugs, and the chances of bleeding is low. But if your risk factors are quite a lot, and then you have to use this anticoagulation, and then we divide these patients on what is the risk of bleeding in this group of patients, and depending upon that, we put these patients on secondary preventions of VTE. Coming to the warfarin and acetrom, if you look into the published results, so VK therapy has got several limitations. Unpredictable response, narrow therapeutic windows, routine coagulation monitoring, slow onset and offset of action, intracranial bleed, drug interactions, food interactions, frequent dose adjustments. But, we had to use these drugs because there was no choice. So from last few years, then we started getting all these, newer drugs which came into it. So what are the newer drugs which has come into the last 10 years? So there were drugs which were used to act on factor 10A. So these are apixaban and rivaroxaban, which are available in our country. Then there were drugs which were acting on the antithrombin, and which was, direct thrombin inhibitors. And these were dabigatran, which is, used in our country. So there are three important drugs which are available. I'm not going to talk about edoxaban. We had a trial in our center for that, but it's not available in our country, so there is no point talking about it. Now, NOACs has got various names, which are written here, and DOACs, direct acting orals, and newer orals, novel orals. So various names which are there, so you can remember them. Now, important question comes is, what are the different characteristics of all these different drugs? Now, this is important. So we'll concentrate on the first four. Let's say the warfarin is given, once daily. Dabigatran is twice daily, rivaroxaban once daily, apixaban twice. Now, once you start your practice, you need to actually know all these three drugs: dabigatran, rivaroxaban, and apixaban. The reason is because there is some preference of one drug over the other. And also you need to understand the half-lives, food interactions, and all. So I'm going to go through that, which are very, very important and which I learned over a clinical practice in the last 8 years. Now, warfarin acts as a vitamin K dependent factors, and dabigatran on factor 2, thrombin inhibitor, and rivaroxaban, apixaban 10A. When we look into the peak effects, warfarin can take 5 days, and all these other drugs, newer drugs, can have the effect within 2 to 4 hours. If you look into the half-life, warfarin can take 3 to 4 days for its effects to go from the body, and all these drugs' effects will disappear normally within 12 to 14 hours. There are multiple drug interactions with warfarin. Drug interaction is much lesser. Now, renal clearance is important. If you look into the warfarin, it does not have a renal clearance. But dabigatran has got the maximum kidney clearance. And rivaroxaban has 66%. Apixaban has got the least NOAC clearance, 35%. Anticoagulation monitoring, warfarin requires, other drugs does not require. Antidote is available for now all the drugs, and so it's not that it's not available. Now, when we treat the acute DVT, there are various treatment options. So you need to remember all these protocols. So if you want to use warfarin and acetrom, you start with heparin, put the patients on warfarin acetrom, monitor the INR after 5 days, and then continue the anticoagulation for 3 to 6 months, depending upon the need. If you want to use dabigatran, you have to start the heparin, low molecular weight heparin, for 5 days, because that is according to the protocol. You cannot start dabigatran from the first day. And after 5 days, you start the patients on dabigatran, 150 milligram twice a day, and you can continue this for 3 to 6 months, depending upon the duration required. Similarly, rivaroxaban, you can start it from the first day. So if the patient has got only mild to moderate DVT, you can start rivaroxaban and apixaban from the first day. So you have to give loading dose. Rivaroxaban, you need to give loading dose for 21 days, 15 milligram twice a day, followed by 20 milligrams. Apixaban, 10 milligram twice a day for 7 days, followed by 5 milligram twice a day for 3 to 6 months. So once you start using this drug, so these are very easy to remember. Now, when you look into the clinical trial designs, so there has been various trials. I'll not go into details, and most of these trials has been studied up to 6 to 12 months. And if you look into the trials results, the most important point is this, that the chances of recurrent DVT, mean the chances of having DVT on the drugs is varies from 2.4 to 2.1%, which is similar to the warfarin and acetrom. And if you look into the bleeding risk, the chances of bleeding is 1 to 1.7%, which is actually much lower than the warfarin and the acetrom. If you look into all these drugs, the efficacy as compared to warfarin is similar, as I told you before. And if you look into the major bleeding, the chances of having a major bleeding as compared to warfarin was slightly lesser with NOACs. If you look into the long-term prophylaxis for the recurrent VT, all these patients had and better actually prevention of recurrent DVT than the warfarin. And if you look into the major bleeding risk as compared to the placebo, which has got higher risk of recurrence, the green ones are the chances of recurrent DVT, the red ones are the chances of having a bleeding. So placebo has less chances of bleeding, but huge amount of chances of recurrent DVT as compared to dabigatran and apixaban, very low chances of recurrent DVT and low chances of bleeding. And rivaroxaban has got slightly higher chances of bleeding, but low recurrent DVT. Now, which NOACs to which patient? Then if all these NOACs are so good and they're all similar, so should I use any one of the NOACs? No, there are slight differences. Let's go with that. Now, let's see dabigatran, all these three drugs. Let's see the food. Dabigatran and apixaban, no relation with the food. But rivaroxaban, if you want to use 15 and 20 milligram, that should be taken with food, which is very important. Similarly, dabigatran, we cannot transfer the drug into the dose administration aid. But apixaban and rivaroxaban, they both can be taken out of the packing and can be given to the old patients, where the marking has to be done in a dose administration aid. So which is very important this. All these three tablets have to be swallowed whole, not as a, chew it and take it. Coming to the antidotes, we got the antidote for both the drugs, all the three drugs. The dabigatran antidote, which we all know, etarucizumab, which we have also used. It is approved in India. It's available in India. But the antidote for rivaroxaban and apixaban, which is available in the world, is called andexanet alpha, is not available in our country at present. When we look into the pharmacological character, all this, the most important thing, which is important point, is the renal clearance. If you look into this, the apixaban has got the least renal elimination, which is very important. So if it has got the least renal clearance, so what will happen is the first drug of choice in patient with any indications for an anticoagulation and stage 3 CKD is there, so will be an apixaban. So you can use the full dose of apixaban 5 milligram twice daily until, if your age is more than 80 years or your weight is less than 60 kgs or serum creatinine is more than 1.5, then you can need to decrease the dose to 2.5 milligram twice a day. The second choice is a low dose of dabigatran 110 milligram twice a day or rivaroxaban 15 milligram. So we should not use in the renal failures dabigatran and rivaroxaban in the full doses. Similarly, the patient on hemodialysis. As all these three drugs can cause the bleeding in this group of patients, so try not to use any of these drugs. If you can use either a warfarin with a very close monitoring, or you can use a low molecular weight heparin. The drugs like all the other all the NOACs, they should not be the preferred choice in the patients on hemodialysis. Let's see the renal clearance. If you look into the dabigatran, it's contraindicated in less than 30 ml clearance. But if it is less than 50 ml, we can use 110 milligram twice a day. Rivaroxaban is contraindicated less than 50 ml, similar as apixaban. And if it's a 15 to 30 ml clearance, we can use the low dose apixaban and the rivaroxaban. Similarly, age group. If the patient is more than 75 years, we can use an apixaban 5 milligram twice daily as a first choice. But if the patient is more than 80 years and less than 60 kgs, more than 1.5 creatinine, then we decrease the dose. But the second choice will be a low dose dabigatran or a full dose of rivaroxaban. Similarly, any patient with GI bleeding, because rivaroxaban is associated with slightly higher risk of GI bleed, and apixaban has got the least. So the first drug of choice, any patient with GI bleed, if you have to use it after 30 to 60 days, then you need to use an apixaban 5 milligram twice daily, or you can use a dabigatran in the low dose of 110 milligram twice daily. Similarly, in cancer, as you know, the low molecular weight is a treatment of choice. But in the last 2 years, we have multiple publications where NOACs has been shown to have similar effects. So we have also used in number of patients with cancer NOACs, and we have found a good result. So I think NOACs is taking a place of low molecular weight heparin in this group of patients. Strokes, as you know, most of the strokes are ischemic, so we can use an anticoagulation. Lot of trials which has been published, on atrial fibrillation and stroke, related to the NOACs. And what they have found is that all the NOACs are favorable as compared to the warfarin for prevention of stroke. When they should not be used. So there have been minimal studies with the metallic valves. There are studies on the way that if you have a mechanical heart valve, then the NOACs at present should not be used. Very bad renal and liver functions. Arterial disease low dose has been approved now, 2.5 milligram as a preventive, but not the full treatment dose. Antiphospholipid syndrome, still the warfarin and acetron is a drug of choice. And okay. As a cancer, as I've told you, the VT in patients with active cancer, there are new trials which have been showing the favorable results with NOACs. So this is the last slide where I've shown that patients with, stroke or AF, we've got a high risk, what is the drug of choice is the normal doses of these drugs can be used. If the patient has got a high risk of bleeding, then use the first drug as 5 milligrams of apixaban with low dose of dabigatran. If the patient is very old with a low weight, or creatinine is more than 1.5, then you can use apixaban 2.5 milligram twice daily, or rivaroxaban 15 milligrams, or a dabigatran 110. But try to avoid the dabigatran. So apixaban, rivaroxaban should be used because dabigatran has got 80% renal clearance. So thank you. So any questions we can take now? Priyanka, any questions? Then let me know, okay? Cost of antidote, Dr. Piyush is asking. You see, the antidote which is available in our country, Idarosizumab, Praxbind, what we call is a trade name. It's presently now is 2.5 lakhs. So, so that's a very big issue. The antidote really reverses the drug within 5 minutes. But I recommend that any patient who's on long-term anticoagulation, patient who's taking dabigatran, they should register with the care program, and take the benefit out of it, because then the antidote will be free of cost. In terms of if you're using an apixaban and rivaroxaban, and if you have a bleeding, then we need to use fresh frozen plasmas, blood transfusions, and conservative treatment, as the effect of the drug will wear off between 8 to 10 hours. You see, why dabigatran gets started after 5 days, unlike other NOACs? This is because of the trial. You see, this was one of the first trials, and they thought that we should use a low molecular weight heparin in the acute settings, because when the patient has got a lot of pain, and under that coverage only, and after that we should start the dabigatran. Because all the trials which were done with the dabigatran, they were designed like this, that to give a low molecular weight heparin for 5 days and then dabigatran, and then all the approvals were done, all the trial results were according to that protocol. So that's how the treatment protocol will come in. So you cannot change the treatment protocol in your clinical practice what has been studied in the literature. So, in terms of if you look into the, just by guess, yes, you may be able to start the dabigatran on the first day, but we still don't know what is the loading dose of dabigatran which is required. Should we start it on the normal doses? How much dose is required? How many days you have to load it? Because it's not been studied. So we don't know. So that's why at present, if you want to start the dabigatran, you need to start 5 days of low molecular weight heparin. Any other questions? Please do ask. There has been studies going on now of the NOACs in children. The results, small publications are coming up. I think we will know about this soon in a very good way. Treatment of DVT in renal failure is very difficult, and CRF. Uh, Using NOACs in cancer patients who are going to use chemotherapy is also, controversial, and it's slightly difficult to manage, but you can do it. Is there any role of NOACs in preventing graft thrombosis in vascular bypass? Um, you know, that's a very difficult question to answer for me, because it's not been studied too much, and for the role of NOACs, but we are using it. A lot of vascular surgeons I know, they have been using it, and but if you look into the trials and all, so I really don't know the answer to that question. But yes, we are using NOACs if we feel that the graft is critical, and graft is a very long one and has got a poor distal runoff. Wherever you want an indication for a warfarin or an acetrom, yes, you can use a NOACs, but it will be sort of off-label use. Should we use only original salt of NOACs? Personally, I prefer yes, very strongly, uh, because there has been some studies. Not all the compounds which are generic now available in the market. They have done the physiological studies of the salt. A few have done them, not everybody. So I really don't know the effects of the drugs personally. So I'll give you a short answer to this question is, if I have to take the NOACs and I can afford, I will definitely use the original molecule of any of the compounds. Yes, if I cannot afford and it's difficult, then yes, you can use the generic medicines. Another question is, a male patient more than 80 years atrial fibrillation with acute femoropopliteal DVT undergoes 7 days on low molecular weight heparin, fondaparinux, therapeutic. What prefer anticoagulant dose to continue? Okay, now if you would have asked me this question 2 years back, I would have told you to put this patient on warfarin. But latestly, there are a lot of trials which has been published, and they have shown that in the old patients, the NOACs have got actually less bleeding than the warfarin. So 7 days of fondaparinux, and so you can use any of the NOACs because there is only one risk factor. There is no renal failure, and so all the three NOACs has been shown to be quite effective. So you can use apixaban, you can use rivaroxaban, and you can use dabigatran. So yes, you can use the NOACs in this group of patients. Priyanka, anything you want to share or something you want to say? Another question is it better to continue NOACs lifelong in patients with recurrent DVT, or can we stop it once the D-dimer? Now, once you have a recurrent DVT and you prove it by an ultrasound, then the medical indication is to continue lifelong anticoagulation. Unless the patient has some contraindication like a patient has massive GI bleed or patient has to undergo some surgery, something like that. Otherwise, you need to continue the anticoagulation lifelong. Just stopping the anticoagulation on the basis of D-dimer levels will not be right, because just having a recurrent DVT means a patient has got some prothrombotic factors which has caused you the recurrent DVT, and now you need to continue. Now, which NOACs to be used in severe COVID on discharge? You can use any NOACs, so there is no issue. NOACs has been studied in COVID, so we have used it in more than 50 patients in our setup, and either with the treatment or in the prophylactic dose. So if the patient does not have a complication, venous or arterial, then you can use a prophylactic dose of the NOACs for 6 weeks after discharge. Okay, Priyanka, if there are no more questions, should we stop?
Sir, Dr. Prinka has some problem, so she disconnected actually. So she's having issues to connect the meeting.
Oh, okay. Don't worry. That's fine. It's okay. I think I'd like to say thank you to everybody, and thank you, Priyanka, thank you, Vishal, and thank you all the participants who has joined up. And I think we can close the session. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, bye-bye.